All right, so I didn't expect to start with this slide, but you don't know how crazy it is when people come up to you and say, do you know this dude named Brian Stevenson? Have you ever heard him speak? And so I thought, since I'm around a bunch of lawyers, I should probably give some proof. So yes, my brother and I stayed in the same bed for 12 years. We lived in the same bed. And he was a roommate of mine in college. And so, yeah, I think I do kind of know him a little bit. And part of the reason that we're talking here today and the area of research that I've been interested in for a long time, as a father, as a son, as a researcher, as a therapist, has been, does it matter when parents talk to their kids about race? We call that racial socialization. And the answer to that question is yes, right? And to what degree, it begs other questions, to what degree does it push us to understand from the child's perspective, what is racial justice and racial injustice like? A lot of times we think about it from the perspective of adults. And as parents, what does it feel like when you have to prepare your children for a world that doesn't appreciate who they are, who doesn't see their humanity, whether it's preschool or adolescence? And so the idea of that talk that many of us know that we try to give, we fumble through, and some of our research is teaching families, how do you have that talk? It's very stressful. And so to the degree that we think of, how do we see these issues of injustice in the eyes of children? So this is my brother and I when we were very young. We were, in many respects, trying to escape southern Delaware. We were running away. We kind of agreed. He was my road dog, as it were. And so on our way, we realized we can't drive, and we got caught by our parents. And as you can see here, Brian even then could not tell a lie. My father had fantasies of us being twins, so that's why we always looked alike until we were 17. And so just to let you know, he's my brother. This is our family growing up. And people also ask me, you know, about my brother and I, but I have to remind them, we also had a sister who is the little girl you see here, and she looks exactly the same today as she did then, just to let people know. And my parents are very different. And even here you can see Brian's skepticism about injustice. You know, he's looking, what is that photographer trying to do here? You know, it's like, you know, there's an injustice going on. So, started early. But having a family like ours is a little different. My parents were very different in how they dealt with racial conflict. My father, who just passed away a year ago, is here with the hat. He worked in the movie theater in Rehoboth Beach, and his belief was when there was racial conflict that we had to face, is because he had us in church, would seem like 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. He believed that if somebody bothers you, you pray for them, and God will get them back in the end. We're never sure when the end was going to be, but that was his belief. It was spiritual. It was one day in that great getting up morning. That was his idea. Very Martin Luther King-ish, right? In some respects, he differed from my mother, very different. She was more Malcolm X-like. If my father and my mother could look down now as they are, they would be singing and shouting at what my brother has done. It's amazing. Yeah. So my mother had a very different style. So she was not waiting for any resolution in the end. She was literally right now in your face. Growing up in North Philly, very different sort of approach. You know, when we were children, you can imagine some parents, some mothers, after you wake up in the morning, saying to their kids while they're in the bathroom, you know, pick up your clothes because this bedroom looks like a pigsty. My mother's a little different. We'd be in the bathroom, she'd be saying stuff. We didn't land on Plymouth Rock. Plymouth Rock landed on us. And so we would say, yes, Mom, yes, Mom. Going about our day. And so, in the interest of both time so I could get to my colleagues, I'm reminded of Martin Luther King, who in his letter from a Birmingham jail made a comment. He's talking to folks about dealing with racism and unjust laws and debating the whole idea of why it's important to resist. And there's a point at which he stops becoming a preacher, he stops being an activist, and he becomes a parent. He says, you suddenly find your tongue twisted, he's stressed, tongue twisted and your speech stammering as you seek to explain your 6-year-old daughter why she can't go to the public amusement park that has just been advertised on television. And see tears welling up in her eyes when she is told that Funtown is closed to colored children. And see ominous clouds, beautiful imagery, ominous clouds of inferiority beginning to form in her little mental sky. And I think of that when we think about education. To what degree are we ready to address the ominous clouds of inferiority that are beginning to form in our children's little mental sky? So the work that we're doing, we know that racism, and I'll make the argument that interpersonal contact around race is just as important as systemic issues. If you look at the police encounters that have led to the deaths of young people and adults of color, they've happened within less than 2 minutes. And a lot of our ideas about racial progress and justice are ideological. The question is, can they be decisions that we make in less than 2 minutes? Is there a way to translate those ideas to actions when we're under the most incredibly intense, stressful moments to make a healthy decision? So we know that racial stress related to racism is connected to a variety of health outcomes for men and women. And it so happens that racial socialization, talking to children about race, can be an antidote, somewhat of an antidote. And the question we had is, why is it in our studies we've been finding this positive outcomes related to racial socialization? And we've been looking at this notion over time as to why. And one idea is that the more parents talk to their children around race, the more they're prepared for what's about to happen, right? That's why this museum is so important. Because if you don't know what is about to happen, based on what has been happening for a very long time, how can you be prepared for it? And so we've been teaching folks around the country about literacy, this ability to read, to recast, and to resolve a racially stressful encounter when you only have 2 minutes. Reading is, can I see when a racial moment shows up? Recasting is, if I'm a level of 10 stress level on a scale of 1 to 10, how do I bring that 10 down to a 5 so that I can get my brain back on point where I can see, I can hear, I can make a decision, an adjust decision that matches my racial ideology in less than 2 minutes. And resolve is, do I make a healthy decision that isn't an underreaction where I pretend that really didn't bother me, that racial moment, or an overreaction in which I exaggerate that moment and leave unhealthily. So we teach people to do this sort of strategy over time, which involves a lot of practice. Calculate, locate, communicate, breathe and exhale. Calculate is, what feeling am I having in the middle of this racial moment on a scale of 1 to 10? It could be positive, it could be negative. Locate is, where in my body do I feel it? And the more specific you can be, like a Native American 5th grader told me at a Chicago school that she was angry at a 9 that she was the only Native American girl in the school. And she said, I can feel it in my body, in my stomach. It's like a bunch of butterflies fighting so much with each other. They fly up into my choke and to my throat and choke me. If a 5th grader can be that detailed, why can't we? And communicate is, what messages come to my mind, what statements, what images that remind me of who I am in this moment. And so we've been training this for quite a while. The problem with this work around racial socialization, we believe it prepares young people and can lead to racial literacy, but the problem is it takes practice. And I know some of you are saying, practice? Practice? We're talking about practice? Yes, we are talking about practice. It so happened that in August of 2013, I have 2 babies who's sitting in the front row. Brian kept saying that he's trying not to get weepy, but unfortunately, we're full of weepiness this entire week. But I have 2 babies, and I worry about them as if something might happen to them, as many of us do for our children. My oldest, Brian, is 27. My youngest, Julian, is 13. And we don't have time to talk about how that happened at all. Whatever. So, Julian and I, one day, August of 2013, were watching television, or we were just folding clothes, which in and of itself is such a rare occurrence. We should have known something strange was going to happen. And in the process, on CNN, Trayvon Martin's parents were on the television crying. And Julian, at 8 years old, became glued to the television. He had 1,000 questions. Julian always has 1,000 questions. He wanted to know, why did this happen to Trayvon? He wanted to know, and I was not ready for that discussion. It was stressful. Even after 20 years, 25 years of talking to people how to talk to children, I was stressed. I wasn't ready to have the discussion. And so I'm going to play for you a little bit of that conversation now.
Like, we're better than you, and there's nothing you can do about that. And if you scare me or something like that, I will shoot you because I'm scared of you.
Exactly. And the problem is that because of bad images on television, the way that people are trained and raised when they grow up, they're raised to be scared of black boys and black people, and it's not right, it's not fair, but, and it's one thing to be scared. People get scared all the time, but it's wrong to take that fear and say it's okay to kill somebody or hurt somebody. And I don't like the idea, and that's why Daddy gets mad about it sometimes, but that's also why Mommy and Daddy want to teach you, so that if anybody is following you, that you need to know how to talk to them and to stand up for yourself, yet not underreact or overreact. You know what underreact means? Like, it means like you pretend nothing's happening.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Like, something's happened, and pretending, oh, it's fine.
Yeah.
But overreacting is like yelling and saying, oh my God, it's just like you're panicking.
Yes, exactly. And partly that's because even with cops, some cops who are not, and all cops are not bad. Most cops know exactly what they're doing, but some cops might be, have been caught being afraid of African American boys, and then try to be difficult or rough with them and treat them as if they're doing something wrong. You want to treat everybody right. You always do. I notice that. But if somebody's
it's not the same for everyone else.
It's not always the same. No, you got to be careful.
Because people can disrespect you.
Exactly. And
I'm gonna think that you don't look like you're. It's like they're saying that you don't look right, so I guess I have the right to disrespect you.
Yeah, and that's what we call that racism. That some people, a lot of people, unfortunately, will look at a boy who like Trayvon or like you with a hoodie on and see that maybe and believe there's something you're going to do wrong. Instead of other people who wear hoodies, they don't look at them the same way. And that's wrong. And that's why Daddy wants you to be safe. And that's why.
So you mean like when you said other people, you mean like if Trayvon was a white, that he wouldn't be disrespected like that?
We don't believe he would be disrespected like that. No, not in that neighborhood where Trayvon went. But the other thing is true, that even black people can look at other black people as if there's something wrong with them and other boys, and that's a problem too. We're just as concerned as if anybody says, I'm better than you.
Really?
Anybody who looks at another kid and says, I'm better than you, or you're more dangerous, or you're a criminal because you're black and you're a child or boy, that is wrong. It doesn't matter who does it.
And Dad, I need to stop you there.
What?
So remember when we were invited me over at the swimming pool? Mommy told me that there was a guy disrespecting us, And they're like, oh, 2 guys.
Yeah.
And they're like, what?
Yeah.